Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome everybody to this very, very interesting session that we will have with the European Muslim Network today or tonight. The European Muslim Network, EMN, is a think tank that gathers European Muslim intellectuals and activists throughout Europe. The aim is at fostering communication, views, and expert analysis on the key issues related to the Muslim presence in Europe. EMN is designed to provide a space of encounter and discussion for Muslims and non-Muslim organizations, NGOs, stakeholder groups, and policymakers to produce practical recommendations for action of common concerns in a multi-constituency approach. Today, I am very glad that we have been able to gain one of the outspoken experts on the situation in France. And no doubt that what has happened in France during the last weeks had a lot of consequences for Muslims all over the world. As Muslim organizations within Europe, we have been shocked by part of the events that we have been seeing and witnessing on TV. But at the very same time, there is a lot more that we need to look into. And France is known as a laboratory for the relations of the Muslim presence in Germany. I would like to invite Jasser Louati, who is an expert in this, who speaks 3 languages, who has been educated in the US and Oxford and in France, and who is one of the special voices that we see in this regard on screens. Yasser, maybe we could invite you to start with giving a quick general outlook about the situation of the Muslim presence in France. You need to unmute your. Okay, now yes.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and thank you, brothers, for this session. So yes, my name is Jasser Louati, and I'm the head of the Justice and Liberties for All Committee, CJL in short, which is a human rights and civil liberties organization. We produce knowledge in terms of investigation and research. We do popular education and community organizing and mobilization. Our philosophy is that we have to think, we have to be independent from thought to action and without relying on the state or the leftists, etc. Just a quick correction, if I may, Ibrahim. Actually, I was not educated in Oxford. I'm a pilot by training. I used to be a captain, so that's my initial job. But I did go I did study history in the University of Paris, and that's true. I used to live in the US as well. So right now, as you know, France has again or is again making headlines for the wrong reasons, not for making humanity move forward, not for freeing humanity or discovering some groundbreaking, knowledge, whatever. Today, it's again Muslims under the heat of public debates in France. So the situation for Muslims in France is quite specific. France has by far the biggest Muslim minority in the West. It has a long history, antagonistic, you may say, history with the Muslim world, be it in the Middle East and Africa. And this relationship has been exacerbated in the 1950s and 60s during the anti-colonial struggles. Now, I don't want to get too much into that area, but I want to focus on modern day of Islamophobia of the past 30 to 40 years. Muslims have always been a sociological phenomenon, which means they were invisible. They were factory workers. They were people we often speak of without ever seeing them. And as the first generation of French-born Muslims began to rise, their visibility shocked the opinion. And this can be traced back to the early 1980s. In 1983, there was a famous march against racism and for equality in the aftermath of several police beatings and far-right killings of Muslims. It was mostly anti-Arab racism. And the 1983 march actually shocked the opinion because they became visible. They organized a march that gained momentum, and that sent a message that those Muslims are here to stay. And right after that, a machine was put into motion in order to question again the citizenship code, because how come they can be critical of France when they are supposed to just be here and feel like they have a debt towards France? So in 1987, there was the Marso Commission, which was about canceling the right of the soil, giving you French citizenship when you are born in France. That was in 1987, which is even before the first hijab headlines of 1989. So already when Muslims came to existence or appeared in the public debate as a social and political entity, it became already a problem. In a country which is itself rigged with social movements, revolutions, revolts, rebellions, etc. So we can't actually, that proved how French those Muslims are, because they adhered to the long tradition of France of rebellions, revolting against the state and demanding concessions of the state. And asking Muslims to remain quiet is actually anti-Français. That's being anti-French, if I can say it. So as the 1980s moved forward, we had the legacy of the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. We had the Middle East boiling after the 1973 clash, etc. 1989 kind of marked the beginning, a new plateau, because we had two kids who were in secondary school and they were wearing the headscarf, and there was a small but extremely loud minority that called for the prohibition or banning those girls from wearing the headscarf. So 1989 marked the first national debate on the visibility of Muslims in the public space. Now, there was an infamous column called "Teachers Do Not Capitulate," in the face of, quote unquote, the most misogynistic, traditions, and we have to free those women, the white savior complex, etc., etc. Nevertheless, that loud minority, regardless of the noise it made, lost, because the Council of the State reaffirmed the right for those kids to wear their headscarf on the basis that laicity in France is only about the neutrality of the state, not neutrality of people who use state services, which means the state is neutral, but when I go to the administration, when I go to school, I'm not a state employee. So this neutrality does not apply to me. Nevertheless, that decision of the Council of the State, supported by the Prime Minister, etc., and even a few media pundits like Nicole Cotta, who was quite famous in France, they all said, yeah, the French Republic or the French public school is not supposed to choose kids according to their religion. Yes, teachers don't show their religious adherence, okay, but not students. But this is when we can begin to trace the flaw in the way Muslims organize, which means because 1989 marked a sharp defeat for the Islamophobes. So they kept hammering their discourse. In 1994, they pressed then the Minister of Education, François Bayrou, in 1994, and he published a directive that says, well, if directors feel like the headscarf is causing problems, they have the right to fire. So they are already trying to go around an official decision by the state. So in 1994, and until then, we have 2004. But before 2004, we have the 1995 series of terrorist attacks in Paris, the civil war in Algeria, and then we have 9/11. So during those 10 years, we normalize the threat that Muslims are supposed to represent against national security, against the national economy, taking away the people's jobs, and national identity. So identity, security, and economy. So in 2004, what is quite striking, before the law is passed, there was a mechanism. And that mechanism was that there was a long campaign that lasted 1 year to hammer over and over again that the headscarf is a threat, that Muslims do not want to integrate, that the French Republic is being challenged, as today, etc., etc. But if we take a look at the early 2003 statistics, French public opinion was 47–49% in favor and against the prohibition of the headscarf. So it was a split, it wasn't clearly defined, regardless of the constant hammering by the media. For example, if we take a look at the number of media productions, articles, interviews, shows, etc., a defunct online publication called PLPL counted that there were 1,300 publications on the Muslim headscarf, but only 400 on the ongoing social movements. So as millions of people were taking to the street in 2003 against the new neoliberal reforms, against the pension, the pension schemes of workers, against health coverage, etc., they were dismantling the welfare state one brick at a time. Millions of people marched, but the coverage was made in priority on the Muslim headscarf. And the tipping point was when Jacques Chirac was in Tunis, and he made a discourse and said, we should ban the headscarf, which means the commission that was studying the case, presided by Bernard Stasi. It's very important because that the Stasi commission wasn't in favor of prohibiting it. And Bernard Stasi himself said, had we been asked to speak up for or against banning the headscarf, we would have said, no, there's no need for a new law. And then he goes on and says, but after auditing over 100 people, we were convinced there was a need for a law. But among those hundreds of people, there wasn't one single Muslim woman wearing the headscarf. So they brought in activists, militants, people who were, it was a one-way, it wasn't a debate, it was a monologue to hammer over and over again. And Rémi Schwartz, who was head of the commission, is a notorious Islamophobe. So he selected the people who would speak in the commission in order to rig the game and pass the law. And when Chirac speaks, we have a flip in public opinion, and then that's it. It goes over 70% in favor. So those episodes, I'm going to stop at 2003, then move on to the next episode. 2004 is actually the opening of the Pandora box. Because once we allowed that the state can pass legislation against a specific minority, go around a Council of the State decision, go around the true meaning of the French law on laïcité, which is in the Constitution. Laïcité is in the French Constitution, and again, it's about neutrality of the state. They managed to have this political marketing to make it acceptable that, yeah, the Constitution said that, but there is an urgent need. And then it opened the gates, the gates of hell, the niqab, and then the state of emergency, etc., etc. And today the situation has gone from bad to worse. Now, just a few figures to tell you what it means to be Muslim in France. First one, if you are a Muslim person applying for a job, you are 5 times more likely of facing discrimination. 5 times. So if you send a resume and your Catholic colleague sends a resume, you have to send 5 more just for the interview. So we don't even count the refuse because of your look, because of your name on the resume. The second one, if you are a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf in France, you have a 1% chance of having a job. That's a social death sentence. She can't go to school. She can't go to school field trips. They are banning Muslim mothers from attending school trips because of the headscarf. And she can't even work with a headscarf. And now they want to ban self-employed nannies from wearing the headscarf if they work for the state. And now we have seen countless cases where state employees would come to a Muslim woman's house and say, well, there is, Allah, Muhammad, or Mecca in the background. This is a violation of the code. And they strip them from their right to do this, what we call périscolaire, being a subcontractor for the state. Now, having said that, the state of emergency was passed in 2015, 2016, 2017. So we already have systemic discrimination. They are not random, they are organized and sanctioned by the state. On top of it, we have the repression of Muslims in France in the form of the state of emergency that took place in 2015, 16, 17. 4,600 raids approximately have been carried. The overwhelming majority were carried against Muslim homes, Muslim places of worship, and Muslim businesses, oftentimes thrashing the place. We saw mosques being thrashed by the police. Aubervilliers, for example, was an example. We have the pictures. They just, broke the doors and the windows. And the person who works at the mosque says, hold on, I have the key. No, we don't open doors. We smash them down, etc. And those raids led to only 0.16% of them to an investigation. So try to imagine you raid 4,500 people and only 0.16% of those raids lead to an investigation on terror grounds, which means you have traumatized hundreds of families, father, wife, son, and you don't even have the results to show for it. So which means, as we speak today, we have no idea how the kids who saw their mother humiliated in her underwear or the father being, handcuffed at gunpoint, how these kids are going to grow up. And we are going to pay the bill maybe 5-10 years from now. Go tell a child who saw his father brought on his knees with the handcuffs and a gun on his head that he belongs here and that the Republic loves him. Now we have the case of Emmanuel Macron, who's coming with that. He makes a speech in, I've got 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna, wrap up.
Yes.
We have Emmanuel Macron who makes a speech in Les Mureaux. Emmanuel Macron has failed economically, failed socially. The pandemic crisis, 35,000 people have died. 200,000 people are suing the government or going to sue it. 1 million people have crossed the poverty line. That's in less than a year of COVID-19. Yellow Vest movement, multiple companies furloughing people despite having made money or getting money from the government, and the list goes on. So the only thing he's got is identity politics fueled by Islamophobia. This is what I call Islamo diversion, that you put the focus on Muslims in order to divert public opinion and not seek answers on your own failures. So what he said in that discourse is that there is Islamic separatism. For example, we have to go after organizations, we have to go after mosques, etc., etc. And I ask, which Muslim organization has called for separatism in France? None. Which Muslim leader called for separation from the Republic? None. So that's the question. Anytime you hear that, ask him, which one? None. Nevertheless, they had to create a problem to justify their behavior. Now, Emmanuel Macron has cornered himself because he created a hysteria. Again, 51 raids have been carried against Muslim organizations, and the Minister of Interior says, we are sending a message. We have nothing on those people. And what we're seeing today with the various killings is that Emmanuel Macron is unable to solve the problem he created by supporting not only his tackling Islamic radicalism discourse, he knows he needs to create enemies. And for that, he's going to accuse Muslims of all the wrongs. For example, Gérald Darmanin says he makes a connection between halal food in supermarkets and terrorism. You're going to fight terrorism by banning halal food? Who are you kidding? So right now the situation is drastic. And if the state has allowed itself to do this, it's because it knows we have a tradition of no scrutiny, right? We don't have transparency from within the state, but also it's because the relationship between Muslims and the state has been flawed from the beginning. We can speak about that later on, but we know we never underestimate a person who wants to come to power. They are ready for everything. How about a person who got a taste of power and wants to keep it? They're going to be even worse. And today, as Muslims are being repressed, we ought to ask ourselves what went wrong within communities and with the relationship with the left that has allowed the state to accuse organizations of bogus things and then call for their dissolution. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Yasser, for this historical description of the challenges that the Muslim community or the Muslim presence in general went through during the last 40, 50 years. And no doubt that this is another topic that needs a lot of more detail in many of the aspects that you have mentioned. But when we come, but I still believe that it was quite helpful to understand where we're coming from, because when we try to speak about what is happening in France today, then we need to have the background about the development that the developments that took place in France during the last decades. Anyhow, if we look into the situation of Muslim presence in France, it would be good if you just could give a bit more information about facts and figures, maybe just in 1 or 2 minutes. There is a lot of suspicion about how big is the Muslim community, how is the representation of Muslim presence, how is the wider relation between the Muslim presence today with the political scheme, with the parties, just some, and also the Muslim presence inside the political arena, if we put it like this. So maybe in 2-3 minutes it would be very helpful. I just want to take this opportunity also to introduce my co-speaker, which is Ayub Kostic from Belgrade, and the next question, inshallah, will come from his side. Please.
Thank you. So this, as I said earlier, it's the biggest Muslim minority. Now, we don't have exact figures, and most people tend to repeat the 5 million figure, but that 5 million figure is 20 years old. So we heard 5 million in the 1990s. So there's a lot more than that. So figures are between 7 to 9% of the French population. Exactly how many millions? It could be 8. Could be 7.5, but we know it's around the 9% figure or 10, so which is considerable. Now, the representation of Muslims, the main communities are African, which means Al-Maghreb al-Arabi, which is the Northern Africa, from Morocco to Tunisia, and then Sahel, which means from Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, some Ivory Coast, but that's about it. This is the biggest, contingents of the Muslim communities. There is also some Middle Eastern, Egyptian, a quite sizable Turkish population, which tends to be more organized than the previous communities, and then converts. That's how we also have South Asians, but most South Asians are actually in the UK. We have some of them, but it's not really like, a big representation. In terms of where they live, it's usually near the former major industrial centers. Paris, of course, Lyon, Marseille, Lille, Eastern France. What am I missing? That's about it. Those are the main areas where Muslims were concentrated. And of course, with time and with the fragmentation of the economy, people began moving around. in some families, in many families, we have reached the third generation of Muslims. So that's why it's a blatant sign of intellectual dishonesty to treat Muslims as foreigners. They are here. Now, you can, of course, speak of newly arrived immigrants as immigrants, but the overwhelming majority was born and raised here. In terms of economic representation, historically speaking, there were a monopoly of the Socialist Party, but that is long gone. The Socialist Party stopped being a left-wing party after Mitterrand began his neoliberal turn, but they still managed to keep the Muslim or the Arab vote in the banlieue under control. So it was split between the Socialist Party and the Communist Party. But now what's interesting is that as people's level of comfort in society rose, higher wage, better education, higher wages, they became a little more class conscious and became to vote in the right, which means now the right has a sustainable Muslim vote, and even the far right courts the Muslim vote. What's interesting in between these two categories is that Emmanuel Macron benefited from the Muslim vote because he courted Muslim organizations by telling them, I'm against this, harsh laicite and etc., etc. So many Muslim activists mobilized for him. But the worry we have right now is that despite the rising level of living, etc., political representation is still atomized. So it's all over the place, which means they can come to you and promise you this and that. Usually Muslims, when they vote on the right, they vote because they want to pay less taxes and also on the basis of values, right? Those who vote on the left, they often do it on the basis of class, oftentimes, but also on the perception that the left is less Islamophobe, which is completely a lie. The Islamophobia of the past 40 years is a left-wing product. You have to keep that in mind. So having said that, Muslim organizations are also atomized. So we have the main federations, former UOIF, UOIF, whatever federation of Islamic organizations in France, and which is called now French Muslims. There is, of course, the Grand Mosque of Paris, and there is the FNMF, sponsored by the Moroccan consulate. What am I missing? That's a
Turkish presence.
The Turkish presence, but the Turkish presence, again, they tend to be parallel. That because they have their own mosques, their own organizations, their own community structures, they are quite tightly affiliated to the Diyanet in Turkey. So they don't enter in the count because they have their own mosque organizations, own humanitarian organizations, own networks, right? But we can, of course, count them. Now, what's happening today is that we have the so-called CFCM, the French Council of the Muslim Faith, set up by Nicolas Sarkozy. And that organization was set up in total violation of the laicite. It is not on a minister to set up a Muslim organization or Jewish or whatever. It's religious, it's out of the state's hand. And that organization was supposed to be the representative, but it is suffering from a total absence of legitimacy with the Muslim masses, and they are perceived as the state's representatives before Muslims, and not Muslims' representatives before the state. To put it more, schematically, that's how it works. It's people who are oftentimes handpicked by the state. We don't have fair elections, and they are struggling. Actually, I had a conversation with them. I said, listen, you won't get your legitimacy through the government. Get it from the grassroots. If they support you, you are invisible, okay? So that's how it works. Now, in terms of messages, we have seen a wave of big mosques in the early 2000s, big mosques being built, but that tendency has reduced. Now we see most of the time average size mosques, and oftentimes we see that the mosque becomes the beginning and the end of the community project. We build the mosque, and then that's it. And I think that's maybe a challenge because, yeah, but the mosque is at the center of the believer's life. You pray there, you meet people there, you solve your problems there. And it cannot only be about praying. You know, I'm from Tunisian origin. Under Ben Ali, you pray and get out. Otherwise, you end up in a police station. So that's broadly speaking the, how.
Thank you, Yasser. I give over to Ayub to come to the next question.
First of all, assalamu alaikum to everyone. Assalamu alaikum, Yasser. Thank you for joining us. And I find what you until now said very, very inspiring. And you mentioned a couple of things that I think that are very important, maybe to elaborate a little bit more, or let's say to discuss, especially regarding the statistic, because last days I was writing some articles for here in the Balkans about the situation in France and so on. And for years I'm following the situation there. So I was shocked with these statistics that are showing the level of inmates, or let's say of French Muslims who are in prisons in the urban area, especially. It is the ratio is absolutely, for me, stunning. It is about 70 to 80% that the statistic that I came about regarding the inmates in the urban areas where the most population of the Muslims are. But my question was, you mentioned two things. First was the regarding the integration. And I know this notion of integration is extremely problematic from my point of view, especially when we are talking about the second, third, and fourth generation. We have even more in this, even the examples of fifth and even more generations. So it is a little bit dubious that you are talking about integration of all the citizens who are living here in that country for decades and decades and decades. So if you can elaborate a little bit, or let's say to present to our viewers who are not too familiar with the French this context about this integration phenomenon. And also another thing is this, let's say, I would argue that beside this economical problem, of course, that is one of the most striking problems, is the problem of lack of social mobility in France, which we have in some other countries, like, for example, or let's say at least some higher level of social mobility, on the social scale. So I think, that the France is showing extreme lack of this social mobility, which we can find in some other Western countries, which allows, to the community to develop and to change during the years and during the decades. Yeah. And of course, that goes into the direction of, let's say, being better integrated, or let's say. So this is my first two questions regarding the integration, this very dubious notion when we are talking about French Muslims who are there for decades. And the second one is the lack of social mobility inside the country.
So it is true that beginning with the statistics of people in jail is difficult, but people usually they use the last name or the first name as, or halal or not, or no pork, meals to count the inmates who are, culturally or religiously Muslim. We have to keep something in mind, that it's problematic to refer to that, because if you are a Black or an Arab youngster, you are 30 times more likely of being stopped by the police, more than any other person. Which means if you control more Blacks and Arabs, chances are you will arrest more of them. Why? Because if I keep constantly arresting the same people and not others, I'm going to have a problem, because most of the people I'm stopping, it's them. So if the police, for example, and the judiciary focused on an equal footage on everybody, regardless of their origin, religion, and skin color, it would have been different. So having said that, the National Institute of Demographics, INED, published in 2016 a study which it's a reference. It's called Trajectory, Origins and Trajectory. And it showed that even at the third generation of immigrants, they are still perceived as foreigners. despite them make one generation after another, they make even more efforts to integrate. So there is a problem within French society, the way it functions, if it accepts non-white minorities. So, and this can be also explained by the fact that when France identifies itself as a white country, exclusively, yeah, we like, minorities, we are multicultural, but at the end of the day, the we, W-E, they speak of, it's a white we. When it comes to religion, it's going to be the Catholic faith, and then they will tell you Judeo-Christian values, right? It's a term that makes no sense. They say Judeo-Christian values, but they deported their own Jews 60, 70 years ago, when Muslims in Morocco did not do it. So that term was coined in order to, how can I say, whitewash what was done to the Jews by the white Catholic elites in France. So in the common imaginary, we don't accept the idea that those people are actually real French people, and that on top, they are equal to us. So it's already a problem of the way people identify themselves, and the development of French identity for the past, let's say, 30 years. It's not what I call a positive identity. I am, Turkish because I am a descendant of the Ottomans, and because of our history and because of our culture that spread. No, in France, it's more like they define themselves in opposition. It's not about how I define myself, it's about how I do not define myself. So I am not Muslim, I am not Arab, I am not Black, Turkish, etc. So there isn't already a positive affirmation of their identity. The way history is taught is a history of the white majority. It doesn't say a word about the non-whites in France. It can be traced back to the 16th century. And when they speak of them, it's always in terms of conflict. So you ingrain the idea that with those people, it's only about conflict. Now, for social mobility, it's even worse. As I said earlier, there is a discrimination people face at work because of the school zoning, unequal access to good education opportunities. For myself, when I was in school, and I did not even know there were schools for political science. I didn't even know because I wasn't advised. The only thing I wanted to be was to be a pilot. And they said, no, you cannot be a pilot because your father is not a pilot. Yeah, but I want to be a pilot. No, you cannot. And I ended up believing it. I would believe that, no, I'm not smart enough to do it, and I can never do it. It took me years to recover from that. You add to it that in France, we have a very, very slow renewal of the elites, which means people who are in power, regardless, economic power, institutional power, political power, it doesn't matter. There isn't this vacuum that created by people who leave their positions. There are new ones coming into place. So that's why you have the French expression that says the social elevator is broken, meaning that when people take the elevator to climb the social ladder, etc., it is very, very difficult. On top of it, and that applies to everyone in France, and Muslims are more victims of it because of their precarious situation. There has been a nationwide and even transnational reduction in the buying power of workers. People's salaries have either stagnated or dropped despite productivity increasing. The fact that people are more vulnerable economically, and if it applies to the majority population, it's even worse for minorities, who are the first exposed when a crisis hit. So that's why France is a humongous loser, because people who have a degree leave. And I'm going to quote one of the executives of the National Bank of Abu Dhabi who spoke on the 6th channel in France. He said, we don't understand the French. You have kids who have a very rich background. They speak French, they speak English, and so oftentimes they speak the language of their parents, which means Arabic. So when they come to us, they have degrees from top schools, They are hungry, they want to succeed, and we don't have a problem with them coming here and wanting to leave. They integrate rapidly. So France is literally losing millions of euros per year because you train those kids in schools, and all that money spent by public services is being used by another economy. The Emirates, Qatar, China, the US, Canada, and the list goes on. So that's why I often say that, many French people, they would rather be poor and feel superior than be equal to non-whites and share the wealth with them.
Yeah, but you now mentioned all of these problems, but you just in the beginning you just mentioned this, let's say, the lack of, or let's say you just slightly touched upon the question inside of the Muslim community, what is going on. Yeah. So I'm interested, what, or let's say, do you have some ideas, or let's say ideas, how can Muslim community in the future go forward, and what are the possible answers should be, because we are really witnessing the very confusing, very often, we as outsiders, for example, me, when I, monitoring the situation in France, I'm very confused what is going on. And there are so many, on many levels, there are differences and divisions, ethnic divisions between the different Islamic organizations. Then there are some personal disputes, this and that, and so on. So I'm interested, how do you see the way forward, or how can we, let's say, think about some possible answers in the sense that we, improve the situation of the Muslims? And also, just to add on that, how do you look on, the let's say, some possible, let's say, interaction, or let's say help, or alliances with also Muslim and Islamic organizations from the outside of the France, and how they can help to the French Muslims.
Before you answer, Yasser, I just wanted to let you know that we are live on Facebook and on YouTube, and we also have received a number of questions. So after you have finished, yes, keep it so that we can add some good questions.
I'll just take 2 minutes per answer. I'll just time myself 2 minutes.
Thank you.
So the first one, we have to understand that Muslims in France, they have all the potential. And I don't say this to please people. They have all the potential to organize a successful economy based on the communities across the country. You've got plenty of people who get degrees. You got plenty of people who have developed successful businesses. But the problem is, and I'm going to quote Henri Lawrence, who wrote, the famous historian, from the Collège de France. He said that unlike Jews and Protestants, who, when someone succeeds, he stays in the community to organize it, develop it, open and share opportunities. When it comes to Muslims, the ones who succeed, they leave. They don't look back. And that's a problem. So in terms, for example, of the businesses being developed, all right, they tend to be developed, but oftentimes there isn't, I made it, so I'm out of it. That's it, I'm out of the problem. And they think that because they have economically succeeded, that Islamophobia is not going to affect them until the day their son, their daughter, their wife gets attacked, or he gets attacked, before his religion, her religion, and then they're reminded. So it is extremely important for those who succeed to stay in the community, not to reclude and exclude themselves from the rest of the nation. But France is organized on a multitude of subgroups. You have the networks of the people from Auvergne, the networks of people from Bretagne, networks of the Protestants, networks of the Jews, networks of the Catholics, and that's good because you create some solidarities. And I know you, and we can work. It's better for us to work together. That we don't have it. The second one is that they cannot neglect the role of community organizations, because those community organizations are the ones working 24/7 to defend their rights. Now, of course, the model has to be reviewed. We can speak about that. But when you are a persecuted minority or an oppressed minority or a minority which is constantly being pushed outside of the national body, you need yourself, when you succeed, to support the local community organization that's going to defend your rights. So there is the personal economic success that cannot remain individual, but has to be community-based. That's how it works. And the second one is that communities in France, they all have organizations that defend them, because that's how democracy works. It works through mobilization and lobbying. If big corporations have their lobbies, all communities have their lobbies, which would be a lie to say it doesn't exist. It's not a conspiracy theory. It says, if you want to challenge the state on Islamophobia, people within the state are going to look at how you are organized and what is your political weight. And you don't get your political weight alone. You get it as a community and by working together.
Yes, thank you. But I believe that
opportunity to. Oh, sorry, Ibrahim, I didn't hear you.
No problem. I wanted thank you first of all. Thank you first of all, Yasser, for this short answer. Anyhow, I will just take two of the questions that we have received on the.
Yeah, and I think that one of, I'm sorry, Ibrahim, but I think that one of these questions is very well going along with what Yasser was telling now. This was Alma Sinanovic, a very interesting question is posed, because you were talking about these alliances and the strategies, how we can move forward. So the question that we got is, who are the allies of the Muslims in the France, but not, obviously the question is regarding non-Muslims. So who can be the allies of the Muslims inside France for the betterment of, to improve the situation of the French Muslims?
I may disappoint with my answer. And I'm speaking out of experience, and this is the organizer who speaks. You won't have any good ally unless you are properly organized. As simple as that. Why? Because the left, when they see you disorganized, they will speak on your behalf and they will impose some limits on your struggle. And to them, for example, they will say, oh, well, you should be happy that we're giving you a voice to speak. Nobody will go as far as you for your rights, because you're the one being affected. Now, of course, depending on what you are struggling for, there are better positioned allies. But if you're talking about your rights within the workplace, of course, it should be, in theory, left-wing union organizations. If it's about religious rights, it could be with Jewish or Catholic organizations. But again, it depends on how well you are organized as a community. And oftentimes what we see is that we have empty shells, that say they represent Muslims. And when they speak with better organized, politically heavier organizations, either religious or political ones like unions, they can't impose their agenda. And those organizations will tell them, we will give you crumbles. I'm going to give you an example. If you are fighting against, state repression, and you choose as allies people from far left who 15 years ago were pushing for the banning of the headscarf in schools. But to them, they're going to use you to say, see, we are defending Muslims. But they never address the 15 years they spent normalizing Islamophobia. So they are going to use you to whitewash everything they did to normalize Islamophobia. And at the same time, you think that they are going to defend you concretely. We know, historically speaking, this is, again, it might be a bitter truth. When there are demonstrations, what happens? They're going to welcome Muslim organizations, Black organizations, Arab organizations, etc., to say, see, we represent everybody. But the day there is a negotiation with the state, it becomes a white-to-white conversations. The questions of racism and Islamophobia, they are forgotten, right? So that's why you cannot have an alliance with an organization that is stronger than you, and before even seeking allies, they will come by themselves. You have to properly organize your own ranks. Which organization is going to do what work? How to build legitimacy, how to train people at the grassroots, how to create solidarity networks, how to create the proper relays, how to create the proper safe spaces to debate. Once that is done, people they will come to you because they know how politically influential you are.
But at the very same time, Yasser, we have to bear in mind that this is how elites work all over. And the French model of elites, when we go to look into Africa, for example, many of the African countries that are ruled by France till today, after leaving them out of the colonization, is exactly in the very same matter. They divide to rule. And this is how they have succeeded to divide the Muslim community as well as many other communities, and to see that they give you some general forms of representation. When you look into the governments, you had Christiane Taubira, you had Najat Vallaud-Belkacem, you had a number of ministers who are there, who took over, who played a role. I think the issue is, how could you build alliances outside the Muslim community? How could you join hands for causes that are causes of the people and not only causes of Muslims? In the end, when you want to change something in the French society, then I believe that I agree with you that the we today is a white we, but you have to change this we to a colored picture where people come together. But the moment we start to focus on our own issues and try to build pressure groups, you can see that in the end they have so many opportunities to divide you and then to rule it out in a different manner. What do you say to that?
Well, I will take different examples. We can agree or disagree. We take the Armenian, we take the Jews, we take the Protestants, we take the homosexuals, we take the Polish people. What else do we take? I'm talking only about, small groups. Now, when people say they divide us, I think I've seen enough to see that Muslims don't need foreign interference to be divided. I don't think they need it. And I'm pretty sure, Ibrahim, you've seen a lot more than I did. I respect your greater experience than mine, and you must have been a lot more patient than me, but that's a reality. And when I say that, the way it works is that if your own house is not in order, you can't go and seek to stay at other people's house. For example, political parties, right? They know that Muslims in the state of affairs they are right now are extremely divided, all right? Muslims don't speak with each other. I'm not talking about being united. Maybe I wasn't clear. I'm just talking about being able to, okay, I acknowledge your position, all right? I know where we disagree, but I'm gonna focus on what we agree on. You and I are facing Islamophobia. Our kids are going to face discrimination. They're going to face police brutality, and the list goes on. They're going to be invisible in the media, in the culture. So oftentimes, and I can quote dozens of cases, Muslims won't talk to each other throughout the year, but they will only meet when a political party, when the prefect, when the mayor organizes a meeting. And that's problematic. The second one is that there are no safe spaces to solve community issues. Honestly, I've seen it so many times that even today on my personal page and with the CJL team, we call it a safe space. If you come and shout, threaten, disrespect, insult, you are out. Why? Because I want to make sure that people feel safe so they can express themselves. We don't have those spaces as a community. Wherever you go, people are hidden under the rug, and you have people conspiring against one another in the masjid and everywhere. So we have to be honest with ourselves how we wish to at least get to some understanding. We belong in the same, we are in the same ship. I'm going to give another example, Brother Ibrahim. Take, for example, the way beyond identity, origin, etc. People say you don't wash your dirty laundry in the public space. But with that, not washing my dirty laundry in the public space does not mean I do not have to wash it. I have to deal with it. And that's why you have multiple crises that emerged because there are no spaces for Muslims to even speak with each other. How can they be organized? And political parties, I can name them, Communist Party, Mélenchon's party, the Socialist Party, etc. They know Ibrahim does not speak to Yasser, Yasser does not speak to Ayub, etc. Oh, you know what? I'm going to take the easiest one to get. He's going to be my Muslim representative, so I can say, yeah, I'm Muslim, he's with me, And that's why the community is not moving forward. I spoke multiple times to, Muslim politicians. And they even catch me sometimes in conferences and they listen, like, you know what? I'm going to be blunt with you because I only have 2 minutes. Get your act clean in your own house. Yeah, but it takes time. That's exactly the problem. We want to take shortcuts in our organizing. We don't have safe spaces to share ideas. We don't promote our own thinkers, our own artists, our own activists. The new generation, they are bright, they are smart, they are brave. And look at everything that is organized outside the community. So that's why you get your first, again, I'm not talking about unity. I'm not a dreamer. I'm very realistic. I'm politically inclined to think we can disagree. We can still work together. The people who hate Muslims, they hate each other too. But they hate you more than they hate each other. So that's why they managed to get you there.
Yes. All right. Ayub.
Yeah. Shall we proceed with another question? And also maybe Brother Yasser can tackle a little bit because we had this interview with President Emmanuel Macron on Al Jazeera Arabic yesterday, and it was really interesting interview. I watched it directly, and we have the question, by the way, regarding this from the audience who are watching us. So last Macron, I'm reading, the last Macron interview for Al Jazeera was paternalistic. The viewers thinks that the journalist did not challenge him at all. Me personally, I don't fully agree, but okay. So how can we explain this? This is the question from Hasna. But if I can add one very important, also what I noticed, and I'm interested if you agree about this, when he was talking about this Islamic separatism and who are they and these Islamic extremists and this and that, Then he put the very important part of the sentence when he said, all of those who doesn't respect the values of enlightenment, they can pack and leave. So, he said, first of all, we are against this as Islamic extremists. And then he added this part of the sentence where he's saying quite something which is much, much broader, So everyone who is not respecting, something regarding the enlightenment, he can pack and leave. This is the first thing. And the second thing, what is your opinion how he escaped this Charlie Hebdo and this public projection and everything, that he put all the blame on Charlie Hebdo because now suddenly he doesn't support the Charlie Hebdo anymore. This is ridiculous. And so, yeah. So, yeah.
First, maybe people abroad tend not to know that Emmanuel Macron is not an intellectual. He was never elected into office. He's not even a banker. He was a bank employee. We have to keep in mind that we're not dealing with a person who was mayor or member of parliament, who developed an experience as a politician, for the good or the worse, it doesn't matter. Emmanuel Macron was taken out of the Rothschild Bank to become the candidate for Bernard Arnault and the wealthy billionaires, the tiny billionaires of France. So his understanding already can be challenged, because is he really in touch with French society? Absolutely not. When he calls French people lazy, illiterate, people who are nothing, that's how he calls his own people as a president. So what can you expect from him when he's speaking of minorities? Now, coming to the interview, you're right, it was completely paternalistic. He was very condescending, and he was trying to, look down on the rest of the Muslim world. And you're right. He dismissed Charlie Hebdo. It's published, all the cartoons are published by a private entity, which is true. But what are those cartoons doing in public schools? You can say it's a capitalist society, I don't agree, economy, I don't agree, but you're using them in schools now. And they are obscene. It's not like they are something, okay, they are critical of a religion, and at least, you're showing them to 12, 13-year-old kids. That's already against the law. Now, as in terms of understanding freedom of expression, this tells you the level at which France has dropped intellectually. So freedom of expression is about insulting each other. It's not about revolutionary ideas. It's not about speaking truth to power. It's not about protecting journalists. It's not about critical thinking. It's about insulting Muslim kids. And then you tell them, we are one nation, we live together. How, if you and I live in a small town, and I'll teach my kids to constantly insult you, oh, Serbs this, Yugoslavia this, and Europe, Eastern European that, you'll be like, yes, what's the matter with you? Our kids are supposed to grow together. So that's for one. The other problem that I have with this enlightenment, that's a white superiority complex, because as far as we know, enlightenment was the liberation of the white man. It did not prevent slavery. It did not prevent colonization. It did not depend on massacres under colonization. So as Europe is boasting about enlightenment, they massacred the American Indians, they massacred the Africans, they massacred the Arabs, they massacred everybody across the globe. And that's enlightenment. You keep it. I don't want it. You can think it's good. I don't think it's it was a good thing. It may be good for Europe, because Europe was late in comparison to other regions of the world. So accepting enlightenment as a benchmark, I think it's a very bad idea. Now, when Emmanuel Macron uses that, let's say it's true, enlightenment was good, which wasn't. Enlightenment was good, etc. And he says, if you don't agree with it, then you have to pack and leave. How about freedom of thought? Am I not supposed to be, okay, we have a set of laws and rules. I disagree with enlightenment. What are you going to do? Strip me of my citizenship and expel me from my own country? Freedom of thought, right? Freedom of speech. As long as I don't break the rules. You have Catholic organizations that even are against the Republic. Yeah, they say it. We want the king to come back, the monarchy to come back. What happened with them? Are they going to prosecute them as well? So that's where I'm coming to that. But in terms of practicalities, it is extremely dangerous, because they published a bill last night, which will condition grants, research grants, on the basis that the research work respects French values. That's fascism. Sorry, but say it. You're going to condition research on abiding by values that nobody has defined. What are French values? You mean to tell me the French person who lives in Paris is the same one as the one who lives in, I don't know, Brittany or Normandy or, southern France? There isn't one homogeneous French identity. They are multiple, yet they condition that. And that's why we are literally seeing a dangerous story in France, This morning, the Minister of Interior said they want to pass a bill that will prosecute any person who does not want to be treated by a doctor of another gender. So if a woman says, I don't want a male gynecologist, she can be prosecuted. Where are we going? What are those people doing? They preach one thing and they do the opposite. So that's why the interview to me, and I said that to Al Jazeera, Emmanuel Macron, he's not an intellectual, it's his right, whatever. He needs to get rid of his advisors and get new ones. Because the ones around him, they are only ideologues. When we know what ideologues can do to a country when they are given enough powers.
Yasser, all what you just said gives the proof that the consequences of what is happening in France now are wide more than just reaching the Muslim community.
Yes, definitely.
This in addition, gives you the proof that we need to seek for alliances outside the Muslim community and to show them how much this changes the real nature of the societies they are living in. So I believe, looking into what is happening.
I see your point, and because I know time is running, just please allow me, because maybe I wasn't clear. I did not say we should not seek alliances. And I keep repeating, I've been saying this for over 5 years. It's a habit. Take a look. I keep telling non-Muslims, Islamophobia is not the problem of Muslims alone. Yes. Islamophobia allows for the police state to emerge. It allows for repressive measures to be passed. It allows for everybody to lose their rights. And I tell non-Muslims, take a look at the liberties and freedoms and rights Muslims are losing today. You will know exactly how many will have left tomorrow. Having said that, state of emergency, they began for 2.5, 3 weeks against Muslim homes. They were like, it was brutal in France. I remember I barely slept. For 1 year, I drove 30,000 kilometers on a motorcycle. I had to go everywhere. It was horrendous. For French leftists, they began counting the abuses of the state of emergency when those police raids were targeting their friends under the environmental summit of Paris, the Paris, COP21. And that, to me, in meetings, I had to go clash with them. They were like, no, there must have been something wrong. I was like, they are raiding hundreds of families. And to you, the problem begins only when white people get attacked.
Yes.
So what I'm saying here is not to see and to refuse alliances. What I'm saying is that alliances are necessary. Only coalitions win. It's never one organization or one individual. That's even in the movies. I'm not even sure they would say it in movies. How about reality? No, it's always coalitions, proteiform, which is multifaceted communities, or coalitions that band together and push. It worked when François Hollande wanted to pass the stripping of citizenship against accused terrorists. We mobilized with the left, it worked, and we won. And I remember when I got the news, I was it was an extremely loud victory. What I'm saying is, you cannot have a working alliance when you are not equally organized and politically the same weight as your ally. That's what I'm saying. It does not mean first you spend 10 years with the Muslims, we'll see later on. No, I'm just saying, before even beginning, let's get our act together. I'm pretty sure today, if I ask imams in their mosque, what is their community going through? I swear to God, they would even answer it. They don't know what's happening. They make the dars, make salat, make khutbah, and that's it. And what their communities experience outside, they have no clue or don't care. I receive messages, Jumu'ah khutbah was about the ablution, lying is haram, and this. And okay, we have to speak up, because we see that the discourse being proposed does not answer the questions of the congregations. So that's why, again, you need alliances. They are mandatory. But Before being an ally, I need myself to be for him a reliable ally, and especially an ally he will respect. That's what I'm saying.
We all agree on that. We all agree on that, despite the fact that we are all aware that definitely this is nothing that will come out of the blue. There are a lot of internal challenges that we have to overcome as Muslims. You have described a good number of them. And we also have to bear in mind that in the end, the Muslim community still is not of that professional kind as it should be. Yani where it comes from, how it developed. And this is not only a French issue, but when we look into the rest of Europe, we can see that this is one of the key challenges that we commonly have to go through. At the very same time, I believe that you have kindly described some of the takeaways for the Muslim community as well as for the French community from the current situation. I just want to, before we come to an end, also remind ourselves that a part of what is happening now is definitely deeply connected to the brutality that we see in the acts that are happening. And also, I believe that despite the fact that we feel, well, we don't need to distance ourselves because in the end, this is not at all our belief. But I think that to a certain extent, we also have to think how we can overcome thought that is definitely not in accordance with our deep convictions. So this maintains a common challenge, and we need to see how we can deal with this in the best manner. There are a lot of questions for that, and in the end, this opens up definitely another hour of discussion. But I want to thank you on my behalf first, and pass over to Ayub to give you the last question before we close.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, we had, let us, because we were a little bit maybe pessimistic, or let's say it was, so we have two very concrete questions from the members of EMN, by the way. This is, the first one is from Nizar, and the second one is from our sister Sehia from the Bosnia. And both of these questions can be, let's say, be much more a little bit in the direction of this, in some constructive approach that we can give some advices or something like this. So Sister Sehia from Bosnia, she asked the question about what the ordinary man, or let's say woman, a Muslim woman or man, on the grassroots level can do to let's say push a little bit that the situation change in better direction. This is the first question, and the second question is from Brother Nizar. What could be the can be the takeaways for other Muslim communities in Europe regarding what is going on in France? So what can be the lessons learned, or let's say what can you pass to us, to our Muslim communities? And because what Brother Ibrahim already mentioned, we definitely are also in our respective countries, we are also facing a lot of difficulties and also a lot of things. So elaborate, if you can elaborate also on this. And this is it. These are the questions that we received. There are other questions, but what Brother Ibrahim said, this was definitely the most popular conversation that we had until now, but we could then stay for an hour or so more. But okay, let us finish with these two questions.
So thank you, Zahia and Nizar. So the first question, and that's true, and I keep saying this, that the average person, we cannot all be activists. We need to stop that. People have to work, people have to take care of their families. So we all have our place and a role to play in what I call the struggle. So the minimum that can be done is at least to stay informed. As a minority, you don't have the luxury of ignorance, because the The outside world is not always working in your favor. So you have to be a little bit politically aware of what's going on around you, read the news, stay informed. But when it comes to participating in the struggle, is to support the local organizations, but not blindly. And that's very important. You support the local activists, you support the local organizations, but you remain critical because they are human beings that are going to make mistakes. And that's why the support you give them is, of course, the time you give, paperwork, sharing information, community organizing, etc., but also to tell them the truth when needs be. I don't think it's welcome from a person who calls himself my brother or calls himself my sister to see me do something wrong and remain quiet about it and let me hit the wall and do something bad. So there is a need to support the existing organizations, not necessarily the mosque, but when organizations are set up, you take a look at the charter. What are the objectives? What are their goals? How are they going to achieve that? Is there transparency? Are there elections, etc.? And me as an adherent or a member of it, what is expected from me, and how can I have some kind of accountability over them? So there, because it's like a marriage, you know. If your husband or your wife is hiding stuff on you, you're gonna be tolerant. At the end of the day, you're gonna be like, you know what? There are too many questions around here. All right. And the day you start asking them, things just go out the window. So that's extremely important. Now, that's why inform yourself, stay informed of current affairs. Don't let people tell you what you should think. Support organizations. And as for, especially for the centers of the communities, which are the messages, open your gates, open your doors so people can train people and give them a free education on what their rights are, what is going on in the outside world. The imam does not know everything. That's not true. He may be good in his Islamic lectures, but he is not a sociologist. He is not a lawyer. He is not a politician. And from my own experience, way too many, if not the majority of people who are at the head of messages, they fear activists like us, because they see we are going to develop critical thinking. I'm not coming here to create a revolution. I'm trying to tell them what are their rights and what they can do to protect them.
Yes.
And this has to go, you know, both ways. For example, you don't come from the outside and tell them how they should manage their life. Just tell them, listen, you are a congregation of Muslims. You are the first victim of Islamophobia. What are your rights? What are the means to protect them? Where can we use the mosque as a safe space? All right, we bring in a subject, let's say the news, they're going to pass a law. You know what, Brahim, don't you know a person who kind of understands the law? Bring him in so he can, like, you know, break, you know, the myth so people understand. They go home, they learn something, and there is always a feeling, you know, you were part of something. And I swear to you, we don't need a huge, you know, organization. We need that at the local level, people speak to each other, and there is this kind of a community based on solidarity. And this is, and when that small community carries, you know, its leaders, they are unbeatable because they are carried by their people. And that's, I keep saying that, you know. The second question from Yasser was?
What the European communities outside of, you know, in Europe can, you know, take away from the you know, lessons from France and so on? What can we learn?
Well, what you can learn is that anything that happens against Muslims in France is going to happen to you in one form or another.
Thank you a lot for this.
Just, it's not, maybe not next week, maybe next month, but it's going to happen. Don't worry about it. It's going to come to you. And that's why when I meet, you know, people from, you know, Austria, Belgium, Germany, etc., we keep telling them, listen, there may be the language barrier, but, you know, there is the English language, you know, share the information and take a look at how it is being framed. You know, take a look at, if you see the state acting in a way and Muslims are acting in the wrong way, maybe it's time for you to prepare. And I told to the Americans, I went all the way to California to speak with them. I said, listen, guys, it's not because it's America that you live in a different planet. Many of the problems we face in France got exported through the far right and the Israeli lobby, and then they're using it against you as Muslim Americans, you know. So this need to be connected, it does not mean we have to call each other every week. It's just that we speak with each other once a month, but if something happens, I know who to call. I know who to mobilize. Tomorrow, God forbid, something happens in Germany, Ibrahim knows who to call. We know that happened in France before. How did they deal with it? Bring them in, let's have a call, etc. So that's why keep an eye on what's happening in France and always connect the dots. You know, you share an article, you share a video. When there is a campaign, I won't even speak of money. I'm too shy. You know, I won't mention money. I'm just talking about the time you spend online and your human interactions. Honestly, well, it would be great if, you know, Sarajevo would be the Muslim capital of Europe. That would be my dream, maybe one day. But I promise you, it's when I go to the European Commission and I see how Zionists, they bring in the delegation of 10, 15 countries, they get their act together. And on the opposite hand, when you speak of Islamophobia, they barely listen to us. And Muslim organizations, they don't even talk to each other. It's painful to see it. You know, it's, you know, Ayub saw me, you know, dropping a stone in the European Islamophobia group on WhatsApp. I said, listen, people are complaining that CCIF is being targeted today in Baraka City, but they have been targeting other Muslim organizations before who were smaller, less visible, but because we accepted it, now the state is becoming more ambitious and targeting the more visible ones. And we cannot decide, you know, we can't decide. Solidarity doesn't happen because I'm sending you an email. If I trust Ayub and I've been in touch with him regularly, the day he calls me in, I'm in. I'll find out how I can help, but I know exactly who I'm talking to. So that's why this solidarity, I mean, come on, we are Muslims. And we shouldn't even have to teach these things of solidarity and, you know, standing with each other and be principled. And wallahi, I promise you what's happening today. I made a video 4 years ago asking people, stop being individualistic, stop being alone, stop crushing other organizations. You cannot be alone. Today, I tell them, you created a desert around you because you want to be alone. And now you have the vultures above your head. And now you're crying for help. And at the end of the day, they're going to hit us all. But I'm very optimistic, to close, I'm extremely optimistic on this new generation. But our responsibility is that we leave behind the adequate platforms that can take over, inshallah.
And so in the end, with what you've just said, I want to quote Voltaire, who said, I am not of your opinion, but I will fight to death to make you say it. Yeah. So in the end, maybe we need this within the Muslim exactly. Muslim voices, inshallah Rabbil Alameen. Thank you so much for being with us. It was really a pleasure. I think we have learned a lot about the current situation in France and its history. And we are all aware that this is not just an issue of France, but it is an issue that is targeting, or that is at least an issue for the whole Muslim presence in Europe. So I believe that we have to do our homework. We have to do what is in our opportunity to make sure that we stand for the right and stand for the real values that humanity is sharing. Thank you so much. All the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasser.
Thank you.